Hello everyone. Welcome to BYK Book Summary. I am Amin. Here we decode the inspiring journey, mental warfare, and empire building life lesson of the world's greatest legend. Today topics and their biggest secret are right on your screen. Let's dive in with my AI co-host.
I want you to do something for a second. If you aren't driving, or, holding a baby or carrying hot coffee, just look down at your hands.
Yeah, take a real look at them.
I mean, really look at them. Flex your fingers. Turn them over. Look at the palms. Watch the way the skin moves over the knuckles and the tendons shift under the surface. It feels entirely, undeniably like yours, right?
Right, you assume you're the one in control.
Exactly. You decide when to make a fist, when to point, when to scroll your phone. The underlying assumption of your entire existence is that you are the driver of your own life.
Which is a very natural assumption to make.
But what if I told you that you aren't the driver at all? What if everything you consider to be you, your physical body, your brain, your unique personality quirks, your deepest desires, what if all of that is actually just a temporary biological vehicle?
A survival machine, essentially.
Right, a highly advanced biological mech suit built by microscopic entities that have absolutely no consciousness and are just trying to survive and make copies of themselves.
It forces a radically uncomfortable shift in perspective, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because when you start pulling at that thread, the entire tapestry of human ego, of free will, and of our place in the universe really starts to unravel. We are so incredibly conditioned to see ourselves as the main characters of reality.
Or at least the main characters of our own lives.
Exactly. To be told that we are fundamentally just survival machines, well, it feels almost insulting. It is a massive blow to our sense of autonomy and self-importance.
It's deeply humbling. And that humbling reality is exactly what we are unpacking today. We are doing a deep dive into an idea that completely fractured the scientific consensus back in the day.
And culturally, too.
Oh, absolute culturally explosive. We're pulling from a fascinating stack of source materials centered around Richard Dawkins' highly influential 1976 book, The Selfish Gene.
Very foundational text.
But we aren't just looking at theoretical biology today, because that can get very academic very fast. The sources we have actually pair Dawkins' biological framework with the perspective of the late legendary billionaire investor Charlie Munger.
Which is brilliant because it transforms this from a purely scientific discussion into an incredibly practical manual for navigating reality.
Right.
Munger championed this specific book as an absolutely essential text, not just for evolutionary biologists in a lab, but for anyone trying to understand human nature on a day-to-day basis.
Why was he so obsessed with it?
Well, his argument was always that if you fail to understand the underlying primal evolutionary programming of human beings, you are going to make catastrophic, entirely avoidable errors.
Like in business.
In business, in your investing, in your relationships, and even in how you interpret the daily news. You have to understand the base code.
So that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to fundamentally reframe how you view yourself and every single living thing around you.
It's a big promise, but the material delivers.
We'll journey from the finches with the different beak shapes, the giant tortoises. I think of the phrase survival of the fittest. And in that entire framework, the fittest thing we're talking about is the animal, right?
The organism itself, yeah.
Like the cheetah that runs the fastest, catches the gazelle, survives the winter, and has babies. The slower cheetah starves to death. So evolution, as I've always understood it, is about the individual organism struggling to survive and reproduce.
That is the classical Darwinian framework, yes. And it makes complete intuitive sense because organisms are the macro-level entities our eyes can actually perceive.
We can see the cheetah.
Right, we see the fast cheetah. We see the finch with the specialized beak.
Yeah.
We look around and we see each other. Because our perception is locked at this macro level, we naturally assume the organism is the fundamental unit of natural selection.
That it's the thing doing the living and the dying.
Exactly. But Dawkins introduced a reframing that zoomed all the way in. He took Darwin's concept, bypassed the organism entirely, and went down to the molecular level.
He went microscopic.
He argued that evolution isn't actually about the survival of the organism at all. The fundamental, irreducible unit of natural selection is the gene.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the implications of that because that subtle shift in the camera angle changes the entire narrative.
It changes everything.
If the gene is the fundamental unit that nature is selecting for or against, then the human being, the organism, is suddenly demoted.
Right.
We are no longer the main character of the evolutionary story.
Not at all.
We are just the environment. We are the setting where the story takes place.
We are the packaging. Now, to really grasp this, think about what a gene actually is, stripped of all the complex biology jargon.
Okay, what is it?
It is a replicator. It is a microscopic string of code, a sequence of DNA molecules, and it has one singular, relentless, mathematically inevitable goal: to make copies of itself.
Just copy, paste,
Over and over.
Brr.
The genes that are successful at making copies of themselves survive and persist in the gene pool across generations. The genes that fail to do so simply disappear. They go extinct.
So where do we fit in?
The organism, the human, the cheetah, the finch, is nothing more than the temporary strategy that the gene constructs to ensure its replication.
I was reading through the source notes trying to visualize this, and the analogy that popped into my head was a massive, incredibly complex, heavily armored mech suit.
I like that.
Like something you'd see in a high-tech sci-fi movie, you know? We are these giant bipedal mechs, complete with advanced onboard computers, our brains, and intricate defensive systems, which would be our immune system.
Right. We have sensors, fuel processing.
Exactly. Optical sensors, fuel processing plants in our stomachs. But the pilot sitting inside the dark control room of this mech isn't us. The pilot is this blind, microscopic string of code.
It's a good visual.
And the kicker is, the pilot doesn't care about the mech's dreams or its career or its happiness. It just wants to drive the mech to the next destination, plug into another mech, copy its data, and build a new, younger mech before the current one breaks down.
That visualization captures the essence of it perfectly, though we do need to be careful with the idea of a pilot having intent.
Oh, because it's not actually thinking.
Right. The gene isn't steering the mech with a conscious plan. It's more like a set of algorithmic instructions that built the mech in the first place. And what makes this reframing so profound is the sheer, unimaginable scale of time involved here.
Billions of years.
Billions. These replicators have been running this mathematical algorithm for eons. They started out floating in the primordial soup, just naked molecules bumping into each other in the water, occasionally creating a copy.
Sounds peaceful.
It was, until the environment got more competitive. Resources became scarce. Replicators started breaking each other down to steal building blocks.
Oh, wow. Microscopic warfare.
Exactly. So to survive, they had to start building protective walls around themselves. Those microscopic protein walls eventually became single cells. Then, over millions of generations, those single cells grouped together to form complex, multicellular bodies.
Mechs got bigger.
The mechs just kept getting larger, more sophisticated, more heavily armored, and more intelligent, entirely driven by the need to protect the fragile code inside.
So, bringing this back to you, the listener, why should you care about what molecules were doing billions of years ago?
Because it's still happening right now.
Right. Because it means that the architecture of your entire life is built on top of this invisible foundation. Every behavior you exhibit, every emotional response you feel, every complex social structure we have built as a civilization, it can ultimately be traced back to this one relentless, microscopic drive to replicate.
It really forces you to audit your own life, doesn't it?
It completely does. You have to ponder how much of your daily routine, your ambition at work, your deepest fears, who you find physically attractive, what makes you suddenly furious is secretly being orchestrated by a biological imperative you can't even see.
It provides a framework that violently strips away the romanticism we usually apply to human behavior.
Which is exactly why Munger liked it.
Munger loved this perspective precisely because it removes sentimentality. Think about it when you are standing on the edge of a sheer cliff and you feel that sudden, dizzying surge of pure terror that isn't just your conscious mind rationally deciding to be careful.
It's the pilot screaming.
That is your genetic programming slamming their hands on the alarm bells.
Yeah.
Because if your physical mech falls off that cliff and breaks, the genes stored inside die with it, and their replication journey ends.
So my fear of heights isn't really mine.
Your brain, your complex emotions, your physical pain receptors, they are not there for your personal enjoyment or suffering. They are dashboard instruments installed by your genes to keep the vehicle intact long enough to reproduce.
Which brings us to what feels like a massive, glaring contradiction in this whole theory.
Let's hear it.
If our genes are just these blind replicators that only care about their own survival and we are just the disposable vehicles they use to get around, why isn't human history just a non-stop, brutal, every person for themselves wasteland?
The altruism problem.
Yeah. I mean, we look around and we clearly see incredible acts of kindness. We see sacrifice. We see love. We see people giving up their own resources, their food, and sometimes throwing themselves in harm's way for others.
Right.
How do you get a cooperative moral society out of a biological code that is entirely selfish?
That paradox is the exact hurdle Dawkins had to clear. And a lot of the confusion stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of the book's title itself, The Selfish Gene.
It's a very aggressive title.
It's almost a victim of its own catchy branding. People hear that phrase and they immediately project complex human morality onto microscopic molecules. They think the book is arguing that genes are greedy or malicious, or that human beings are fundamentally evil and selfish at their core.
Right, I instantly pictured genes sitting in a tiny microscopic boardroom, wearing suits, actively plotting to steal a rival gene's lunch money. It implies malice.
And that is the trap. We have to ruthlessly separate the metaphorical use of the word selfish from our human understanding of the word.
Because they don't have brains.
Genes, as we've established, have no intentions, they have no morals, they have no consciousness whatsoever to be malicious with. They are blind mathematical replicators.
So what does selfish mean here?
When Dawkins calls them selfish, he is merely describing a mathematical tautology: genes that replicate better persist. If a gene happens to mutate and program its vehicle to do something completely self-destructive before it can reproduce, that gene vanishes from the gene pool immediately.
Just delete it from the server.
Exactly. So the only genes left standing after billions of years are the ones that ruthlessly prioritize their own replication above all else.
Okay, I'm following the math, but that still doesn't explain the human element of sacrifice. Let's look at the classic example from the source notes.
The mother and the child.
Yeah. Imagine a mother and her toddler are walking by a river. The toddler falls into the freezing, fast-moving water. The mother, without a second of hesitation, dives into the freezing river to save her child. She is risking hypothermia, drowning, the complete destruction of her own survival machine.
The completely selfless act.
Right. From a purely selfish standpoint, wouldn't the logical survivalist play be to stay on the riverbank, keep her vehicle safe, mourn the loss, and just try to reproduce again later?
If the individual organism were the fundamental unit of evolution, the Darwinian view, then yes, staying on the bank might be the cold, calculated survival play.
But we aren't looking at the organism anymore.
Exactly. Remember the paradigm shift we just established. Evolution is not about the mother. It is about the gene. And this is where Dawkins introduces the concept of kin selection to solve the paradox of altruism.
Kin selection. I was trying to map this out earlier, and I went back to my computer analogy. If the mother is a computer and the child is a computer, is it like the mother is sacrificing herself to protect her data backups? Like the child is just a newer, younger hard drive carrying the same files?
That analogy is heading in the right direction, but we need to refine it to be mathematically accurate because the child isn't a full backup.
Oh, right. Because of the father.
Yes.
Yeah.
A child only carries roughly 50% of the mother's genetic code. The other 50% comes from the father. So rather than a full hard drive backup, think of it more like a massive corporation that spins off a subsidiary company.
Okay, a subsidiary.
The parent company transfers exactly 50% of its most valuable proprietary assets into this new, nimble startup.
Ah, I see. So the parent company is heavily invested in the subsidiary's success, but it's not a complete clone.
Exactly right. From the perspective of the gene, which is just running a blind mathematical equation, the mother and the child are simply two different vehicles carrying a 50% overlap of the same cargo.
So they are statistically tied together.
Yes. Now, factor in time and potential. The older vehicle, the mother, has likely already passed her peak reproductive window. Her biological clock is ticking down.
She has less future value to the gene.
Correct. The new subsidiary, the child, is a brand new vehicle with its entire reproductive future ahead of it. The mathematical equation for the gene is brutal but simple. Risking the older, depreciating vehicle to save the newer, high-potential vehicle yields a higher statistical probability of long-term replication.
Wow. So the genes that happen to program a mother's brain to feel an overwhelming, instant, self-sacrificing love for her offspring, those genes will simply outcompete and outreplicate the genes that program a mother to just stand on the riverbank and watch.
Yes. The mother isn't doing the math in her head before she jumps.
She just feels love and terror.
But those emotions were engineered by the victorious genes. And this concept of kin selection expands outward. You share roughly 50% of your genes with your siblings, 25% with your nieces and nephews, and 12.5% with your first cousins.
The math just slowly dilutes the further out you go.
Exactly. There's a famous quote from the evolutionary biologist J.B.S. Haldane. When asked if he would give his life to save his drowning brother, he calculated the math and said, "No, but I would to save 2 brothers or 8 cousins."
That is hilariously bleak.
But the math checks out.
It totally demystifies the magic of family bonds. It explains protective instincts without requiring any sort of biological sentimentality. You protect your family because, statistically, they are carrying chunks of your code.
And we also had to distinguish kin selection from another concept the notes bring up, which is reciprocal altruism.
Because we obviously help people we aren't related to.
Right. Reciprocal altruism is the biological version of, "I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine." You see this in vampire bats.
Oh no, I read this part.
If one bat doesn't find blood one night, another bat in the cave will regurgitate some of this meal to feed the starving bat.
Okay, that is deeply disgusting, but I appreciate the teamwork.
It is teamwork driven by survival logic. The bat sharing the food assumes that on a future night, when it goes hungry, the favor will be returned. It's an evolutionary insurance policy.
But kin selection isn't an insurance policy.
No, with kin selection, you aren't expecting a favor back. The mother jumping in the river isn't doing it so the toddler will buy her groceries when she's 80. She does it because the toddler is her genetic code.
And bringing Charlie Munger back into the fold, this biological reality translates directly into human organizational behavior, doesn't it?
This is where the bridge from biology to human behavior gets really solid, because Munger would look at kin selection and see the blueprint for nepotism.
Absolutely. If you put a group of humans in a corporate environment and one of them gets promoted to a position of power, what almost inevitably happens if there are no strict rules against it?
They start hiring their family members.
Right, they hire their siblings or their cousins, or lacking direct family, they hire people from their hometown or their fraternity, people who look and sound like them.
The in-group.
And from a strictly meritocratic business perspective, that's incredibly inefficient. You are likely passing over better qualified candidates just to hire your incompetent nephew. It damages the company.
But from the genes have you.
It is a massive success. You are securing resources, a salary, status, stability for a vehicle that shares your genetic code.
Munger understood that you cannot design a successful organization if you ignore that primal pull. You can't just write a memo saying, "Please hire the best people," and expect humans to override millions of years of kin selection programming.
It's too deeply wired.
You have to build robust, sentiment-free systems like blind hiring practices or independent review boards to counteract the biological urge to favor the in-group.
It's fascinating how biology dictates the boardroom, but I want to pivot here because while we are biological creatures, humans are obviously so much more than just flesh and DNA.
We certainly like to think so.
We have built an entirely parallel structure to biology. We have society, we have art, religion, complex legal systems, fashion trends, and rapidly advancing technology. If our bodies are just mechs for genetic replicators, what about our thoughts? What about the culture we've built? Surely that isn't just DNA talking.
This is where Dawkins makes what I consider to be one of the most brilliant lateral leaps in modern scientific philosophy.
He takes the concept further.
Much further. Having established the undeniable power of the physical replicator, the gene, he looked at human culture and argued that the exact same mechanism of replication, mutation, and survival was happening invisibly inside our minds.
So going from biological evolution to cultural evolution.
Precisely.
And this brings us to a part of the deep dive I've been incredibly excited about. We have to talk about the birth of the meme. Now, I want to clarify this for the listener immediately. When you hear the word meme today, you almost certainly picture a funny image of a cat with white text over it.
Or a viral dance trend.
Exactly, a TikTok trend. But Richard Dawkins invented this word in his book in 1976. This was decades before the internet was a household concept.
He needed a new vocabulary word to describe the fundamental unit of cultural evolution. Just as the gene is the irreducible unit of biological evolution, Dawkins proposed the meme as the irreducible unit of cultural evolution.
So what is a meme, fundamentally?
A meme is simply an idea. It could be a catchy tune, a specific way of building a wheel, a religious belief, a corporate buzzword, or a fashion trend. And his core argument was that a meme, just like a gene, is a replicator.
It spreads from mind to mind, just like genes spread from body to body.
Exactly.
So if the human body is the survival machine for the gene, then the human mind is the survival machine for the meme.
That's the perfect way to look at it. Let's trace the life cycle of a meme. Imagine you are driving in your car and a new pop song comes on the radio. It has a very specific aggressive hook.
Okay, I'm tapping the steering wheel.
You get to work, and without even thinking about it, you start humming that hook while making coffee in the break room. In that moment, the meme has successfully replicated itself. It used the radio as a transmission vector to colonize your brain.
And then my coworker walks into the break room, hears me humming it, and gets it stuck in their head. The meme has just jumped to a new host.
It's cultural contagion.
Yeah.
It acts exactly like a virus.
It is a virus of the mind. And just like biological evolution, cultural evolution is subject to the ruthless laws of natural selection. Not all memes survive.
Most ideas fade away and are forgotten.
So we have to ask the critical question, what makes a meme successful? Why does a specific fashion trend, like, say, wearing incredibly baggy, wide-leg jeans, suddenly take over the entire globe while another trend dies out in a week?
Or, on a more serious note, why does a highly illogical conspiracy theory spread like wildfire across social media while carefully researched, factual corrections get entirely ignored?
This is where the concept gets a little terrifying, because the success of a meme isn't tied to its objective truth, is it? It's not about whether the idea is good for us.
Not at all. This is the hardest pill to swallow about cultural evolution. The success of a meme has absolutely nothing to do with its quality, its truthfulness, or its benefit to the host.
It's just math again.
Just like the selfish gene, a successful meme is simply one that is highly efficient at the mechanics of replicating. It is purely about its ability to hijack human attention, lodge itself in the memory, and compel the host to transmit it to others.
Let's expand on the conspiracy theory example because that feels very relevant. A factual correction, say, a boring statistical government report might be entirely true and beneficial to society.
But it lacks a hook.
It lacks a hook. It doesn't trigger an emotional response. A conspiracy theory, however, is a perfectly engineered meme. It triggers fear, it triggers outrage, and it triggers a sense of in-group superiority, the feeling that I know the secret truth and the sheep don't.
Those intense emotions compel the host to act.
They share the theory online, desperately trying to warn others. The meme uses the host's fear as the fuel for its own replication.
And Munger understood this mechanism perfectly, even if he used different terminology. In his mental models, he talked extensively about social proof and incentive-caused bias. But underneath those models is the architecture of the meme.
How so?
Well, Munger warned investors to be incredibly wary of market bubbles. What is a market bubble, fundamentally? It is a financial meme. The idea that a specific asset, like a tech stock or a piece of digital real estate, will go up in value forever.
Right. The idea itself becomes contagious. Someone buys a stock, makes a bunch of money, and brags about it at a dinner party. The meme jumps from their brain into the brains of the other guests.
And the guests feel the pain of missing out.
So they buy the stock, driving the price up further, which makes the meme even more contagious. The actual underlying value of the company, the truth of the meme, is completely irrelevant to its ability to spread.
Until the environment changes and the meme collapses. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So viewing the world through the lens of memes requires a deeply humbling exercise in self-reflection.
We really have to question everything.
We all love to think of our minds as fortresses of independent, rational thought. We believe we curate our beliefs based on logic and evidence. But the meme's eye view of culture suggests that our minds are more like open ecosystems, constantly being bombarded and colonized by competing ideas fighting for real estate.
I really want you, the listener, to sit with that idea for a moment. Audit your own brain. Think about the deeply held political ideologies you defend. Think about the slang words you use every day, or the strict dietary fad you follow.
Ask yourself where they came from.
Exactly. Are those ideas genuinely yours? Did you sit down in a quiet room, review empirical data, and arrive at them through independent analysis?
Probably not.
Or is it far more likely that your mind just presented a hospitable environment for a highly contagious cultural meme that swept through your social circle? It is entirely possible that your thoughts are not your own. They are just successful replicators that have taken up residence in your neurology.
That realization is exactly why Charlie Munger considered Dawkins's work to be so foundational. Because once you understand that human beings are operating on a dual layer of programming, we are meat mechs driven by ancient genetic code, and our minds are software ecosystems driven by contagious memes, you start to see human behavior with an incredibly rare clarity.
You stop being continually surprised and disappointed when people act irrationally.
Because it's not irrational to the gene or the meme.
Which brings us perfectly into the Munger mental models. We touched on how kin selection explains corporate nepotism and how memes explain market bubbles. But I want to dive deep into another intersection of biology and human behavior that the source material highlights.
And it's one that completely dominates the modern economy.
Status symbols.
Status symbols are a fascinating synthesis of the genetic imperative and the cultural meme.
I mean, think about it. Why does a human being willingly spend $80,000 on a mechanical luxury watch that is demonstrably less accurate at telling time than a $20 digital watch from a pharmacy?
Or why do we take out massive loans to buy luxury sports cars?
Right, cars that are capable of going 200 miles an hour. When the legal speed limit is 65 and you spend 2 hours a day sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic anyway?
When you lay it out like that, it sounds like absolute insanity.
Yeah.
A purely rational being would never make that trade.
But looking through the genes I viewed, this is classic evolutionary signaling, right?
It is the human equivalent of a peacock's tail.
Ooh, let's unpack the peacock.
Let's look at it. The male peacock grows these massive, heavy, incredibly bright and iridescent tail feathers. From a purely practical survivalist standpoint, those feathers are an absolute disaster.
Because they seem like a huge liability.
They require a massive amount of caloric energy to grow. They make the bird highly visible to predators in the jungle, and they make it physically difficult for the bird to fly away quickly to escape danger.
So if survival of the fittest meant just living the longest, the peacock would have evolved to be small, brown, and highly camouflaged.
But survival of the fittest actually means survival of the genes. And to pass on the genes, the peacock has to mate.
Right.
Exactly. The peacock's tail is a biological billboard. The male is essentially broadcasting a message to the female peacocks. Look at these magnificent resource-draining feathers. Look at how much energy I can afford to waste on this useless display.
It's a flex.
It is the ultimate flex. The bird is saying, my genetic code is so robust and I'm so healthy and strong that I can drag this giant predator-attracting target around the jungle, and I still haven't been eaten.
Okay, bringing it back to the $80,000 watch, the luxury watch is the peacock tail.
Yes.
The person buying the watch isn't buying it to tell time. They are buying it to signal immense resource abundance. They are broadcasting to potential mates or perhaps aggressively signaling to potential business rivals, saying, I have accumulated so many excess resources that I can literally set $80,000 on fire for a shiny piece of metal on my wrist, and my survival is not threatened in the slightest.
And this is where Munger's pragmatic genius shines. If you are an entrepreneur or a marketer and you are trying to sell a luxury product, and you try to market it based on its practical utility or its cost effectiveness, you will go out of business.
Because nobody buys a Rolex for utility.
You have to understand that you are not selling utility. You are selling a meme that satisfies a genetic urge to signal status. You have to market it based on its exclusivity and its signaling power. The consumer's ancient biological programming is driving the purchase, not their logical mind.
When you accept the sentiment-free framework, you align your business with human nature instead of fighting against it.
Exactly. Now I want to transition to another immense invisible force driving human behavior.
And this is one I think everyone listening will immediately recognize in their own lives. We have to do a deep exploration of loss aversion.
The notes highlight this psychological reality, and it's something behavioral economists have proven time and time again.
Which is that the psychological pain and fear of losing something you already have is vastly stronger than the joy of gaining something of equal value.
This is perhaps one of the most profound insights into how our genetic dashboard is wired. And to truly understand why we are built this way, we have to time travel back to the ancestral environment where our software was originally written.
We have to go back to the savannah.
Right, because we are navigating modern cities with brains built for hunter-gatherers.
I'll share a quick personal story that perfectly illustrates how broken this software is today.
Let's hear it.
A few years ago, I bought a stock, I didn't do great research, and the company started doing poorly. The stock price dropped by 30%.
A clear signal to get out.
Right. Any rational advisor would say, the thesis is broken, sell the stock, take the small loss, and put the money somewhere better. But I physically could not click the sell button.
Loss aversion kicked in.
I held on to it as it dropped 50%, then 70%. I would rather watch it go to zero than formally admit the loss and lock it in. Or think about hoarding items. Why is it so hard to throw away a shirt you haven't worn in 5 years? The pain of losing it paralyzes you. Why are we wired to be so defensive?
Your paralysis with the stock is a textbook misfiring of ancient survival software. Let's put your brain back on the savannah.
Okay, I have my spear.
Imagine you are an early human. You have spent the entire day foraging, and you have finally gathered enough berries and roots to feed yourself and your offspring for the day. You hit your baseline. You are safe for the next 24 hours.
Okay, baseline achieved. The survival machine has enough fuel.
Now, imagine you are walking back to your cave, and you stumble across a completely unplugged bonus berry bush. You have found extra food.
Yeah.
That is a gain. Does it feel good? Yes. It gives you a caloric buffer. It might mean you don't have to forage as hard tomorrow.
It's a nice little dopamine hit. I'm happy, but it doesn't fundamentally change my life.
Precisely. Now rewind the scenario. You have your basket of food for the day. You're walking back. Suddenly, a predator attacks you, or a rival tribe ambushes you, and they steal the basket of food you had already gathered. You have suffered a loss. What is the immediate consequence of that loss?
Immediate hunger. Weakness. And if I don't miraculously find more food before the sun goes down, my children and I will likely die of starvation or be too weak to escape predators the next day.
The stakes are completely asymmetrical. Missing out on the bonus berries was just a missed opportunity. Losing your current baseline food supply meant catastrophic failure. Your genetic line was extinguished.
Game over.
Therefore, over millions of years, the genes that programmed their vehicles to be absolutely terrified of losing what they already had, the genes that caused a massive paralyzing spike of stress, cortisol, and panic at the mere prospect of loss, were the genes that survived.
Because the early humans who were lackadaisical about losing their food died out.
Loss aversion wasn't just a quirky personality trait, it was survival-critical hardware.
So, fast forward a few 100,000 years. We aren't on the savannah anymore. I'm sitting at a desk with a cup of coffee, looking at my brokerage account on my high-speed internet connection.
A very safe environment.
The stock market drops by a few percentage points. I haven't physically lost a single calorie. My physical survival isn't threatened in the slightest. I'm going to eat dinner regardless. But that ancient software kicks in.
The dashboard lights flash red.
My brain processes the red numbers on the screen as a predator stealing my food, and I feel a visceral, disproportionate panic.
And that panic drives you to make terrible decisions.
Yeah.
You either freeze, like you did, and ride a bad investment to zero because you refuse to accept the loss, or you panic sell your entire portfolio at the absolute bottom of a market crash just to make the psychological pain stop.
It's all the same glitch.
This is the power of Munger's framework. When you realize that the global financial market is ultimately just millions of biological survival machines, all reacting simultaneously to evolutionary alarms, you stop being confused by irrational market behavior. You start seeing the hidden patterns.
It's like seeing the code behind the matrix. Armed with this evolutionary lens, you can predict consumer behavior, you can understand organizational dynamics, and you can anticipate market movements with incredible precision.
Because you know what the pilot wants.
You stop being distracted by what people say they're doing or the rationalizations they invent, and you just look at what their underlying biology is trying to achieve.
It is a profound analytical tool, but I think we have reached a critical juncture in this conversation. Because we have spent the last 45 minutes painting a rather bleak, mechanistic picture of humanity.
Very bleak.
We have described ourselves as biological mechs, driven by blind DNA, our minds heavily colonized by contagious cultural memes, our societies built on the math of kin selection, and our daily decisions manipulated by ancient software written for the savannah.
Which sets up the ultimate tension of this entire deep dive. It's the question that has been lurking in the background since I asked you to look at your hands.
Do we actually have a choice?
Right. If our behaviors, our cultural ideas, our nepotism, our status signaling, and our market reactions are all deeply programmed by relentless, microscopic replicators, do we actually have free will?
It is the existential crisis that inevitably strikes everyone who deeply engages with a selfish gene. If we are just gene machines reacting to stimuli according to a pre-written algorithmic script, are we essentially passengers trapped in a vehicle?
Are we just watching a movie play out on a screen, suffering from the illusion that we are directing it?
I really want you, the listener, to sit with that uncomfortable question. Because if the answer is no, if we truly do not have free will, then every human achievement, every moral victory over injustice, every profound act of genuine love is stripped of its meaning.
It's just the inevitable math of the universe playing itself out in a complex chemical reaction. We are just dominoes falling exactly as we were placed.
It's a dark thought.
But Dawkins doesn't leave us in that nihilistic void, does he?
He doesn't. And this is perhaps the most triumphant, uplifting, and philosophically significant part of his entire thesis. After outlining all the ways we are controlled, Dawkins' ultimate resounding argument is, yes, we do have free will.
Oh my God.
And the undeniable proof of that free will is found in our unique, unprecedented capacity for something he calls conscious override.
Conscious override. It sounds like a command you desperately type into a terminal to stop a rogue spaceship from self-destructing.
In many ways, that is exactly what it is. Dawkins points out a profound anomaly in the natural world. Out of all the millions of species currently existing on Earth and the billions that have gone extinct, all the countless survival machines operating entirely on biological autopilot human beings are the only species that has evolved the capacity to look directly at our own genetic programming, analyze what it is demanding we do, and consciously say no.
We can actively rebel against our creators. We can look at the microscopic pilot sitting in the mech suit, acknowledge the flight plan it drew up for us, and refuse to follow it.
That's incredible.
Let's really dig into this because the source notes provide 3 incredibly powerful, specific examples of humans successfully defying our genetic imperative, and I think they beautifully illustrate what makes us human.
Let's start with the most obvious, widespread, and daily rebellion against the selfish gene, the invention and use of contraception.
The ultimate biological middle finger to the replicator.
It truly is. Think about the entire purpose of the machinery from the gene's perspective. The only reason the blind code built your complex body, the only reason it gave you a sex drive, the only reason it wired your neurology to make physical intimacy pleasurable was to trick the vehicle into replicating its code.
That is the entire point of the exercise.
The pleasure is the bait on the hook.
Exactly. But human intelligence, which was initially evolved just to help us survive better, kept compounding. The brain got so advanced that we eventually figured out how the underlying biological machinery actually works.
We decoded our own blueprint.
And once we understood the mechanics, we decoupled the pleasure from the reproduction. We use contraception to directly, consciously, and deliberately thwart the absolute core reproductive imperative of the gene, simply because we want to enjoy the physical act without dedicating the next 18 years of our lives to a new vehicle. We hacked our own operating system.
From the gene's perspective, contraception is a complete catastrophe. It is a total failure of the survival machine to do its one solitary job. The replicator hits a dead end.
But from the human perspective, it is a massive triumph of consciousness over biological determinism. We take control of our own lives.
And that leads directly to the second example of conscious override, which is adoption. We talked earlier about kin selection, but adoption entirely breaks that math.
It completely shatters the algorithmic logic of the selfish gene. If we revisit kin selection, we establish that animals care for their young, and sometimes their relatives young, solely because they share overlapping genetic code.
The math dictates the care. A mother bear protects her cubs to protect her genes.
But human adoption short-circuits that math entirely. When human parents choose to adopt a child, they are making a conscious decision to spend vast amounts of their physical energy, their financial resources, their time, and an overwhelming amount of emotional love on a child who is entirely 100% unrelated to them genetically.
It's a profound choice.
From a DNA perspective, they share no closer genetic lineage with that adopted child than they do with a random stranger walking down the street in another country.
It is a total beautiful violation of the survival algorithm. The genetic pilot would never, ever program the vehicle to expend a lifetime of hard-won resources nurturing and protecting competing genetic code.
Because in nature, that's a waste of resources.
In the animal kingdom, you often see the exact opposite. A new male lion will kill the cubs of the previous male to ensure only his code survives. Yet millions of humans adopt children purely out of conscious empathy, moral choice, and a desire to nurture.
We take the hardware built for kin selection, the capacity to love, and we consciously point it at a target of our own choosing. We override the selfish math with genuine non-biological altruism.
I see your point, but let me push back on this for a second, because a skeptic might look at that and say, well, maybe adoption or charity is just another form of signaling.
How so?
Maybe donating to a charity is just a complex way of buying social status in the tribe, so it's still fundamentally selfish. How does the conscious override theory account for anonymous charity? The third example in our notes is donating to strangers.
That is a very fair challenge. If someone donates $1 million and puts their name on the side of a hospital, you can absolutely argue that it is a status play, the modern peacock tail we talked about.
Right, they get prestige.
But anonymous donation completely dismantles the selfish argument. When a human being quietly sends a portion of their paycheck across the world to provide malaria nets for children they will never meet, who live on a continent they will never visit, there is zero biological return on investment.
Right, there is no kin selection at play because they share no significant genetic overlap.
And there is no reciprocal altruism because the person receiving the malaria net is never going to be in a position to scratch the donor's back in return.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are giving away the precious resources your survival machine needs. Resources you traded your limited time on Earth to acquire to benefit a completely disconnected group of survival machines.
You aren't getting status, you aren't getting genetic propagation, and you aren't getting a future favor.
You are doing it entirely because your conscious mind has developed a moral framework that believes alleviating suffering is the right thing to do. That is pure, unadulterated conscious override.
So, synthesizing all of this, where does it leave us? What does this mean for the meaning of humanity? Because we started this conversation feeling incredibly small, like tiny, insignificant passengers locked in a dark room.
And we seem to end up in a place of immense, almost daunting power.
I believe it synthesizes into a profoundly beautiful definition of the human condition. Our biological hardware built us to survive. The microscopic replicators designed the brain, the emotions, the pain receptors, and the tribal instincts purely as rudimentary tools for their own propagation.
But here is the magnificent unintended accident of evolution.
The brain got too smart.
The brain they built had to be so complex, so advanced, and so adaptable to survive in a rapidly shifting environment that it eventually tipped over the edge into self-awareness.
It's like the AI got so smart it became sentient and realized it was in a simulation.
Precisely. And that resulting awareness gave us the ultimate gift, a choice. The friction you feel in your life, the tension between your primal biological urges like fear, tribalism, greed, and the desire for status, against your conscious decisions, your morality, your charity, and your logic, that friction is the defining characteristic of being human.
We are the only creatures burdened and blessed with the ability to look at our own nature and declare war on it.
It has been an incredible, mind-bending journey we've been on today. We started at the absolute microscopic level, looking at how blind, replicating strings of code spent billions of years building us into armored vehicles.
We explored how the brutal math of kin selection strips the romance from family bonds, but explains our deep tribal nepotism.
We traced how Dawkins' concept of the meme explains the viral, contagious spread of our culture, our religions, and our terrible fashion trends.
We then grounded all of that soaring, abstract evolutionary theory into the harsh, practical reality of modern life, using Charlie Munger's mental models.
We saw how adopting this evolutionary lens, this sentiment-free framework, decodes the wildly irrational behavior we see in business, the absurd lengths we go to for status signaling, and the paralyzing savanna-brained fear of loss that drives the stock market.
It gives you an incredible playbook for anticipating the invisible forces driving the people around you.
And finally, we arrived at the triumph of conscious override, the realization that while we are heavily programmed, we are not enslaved. We possess the unique capacity to stand up in the cockpit and say no to our biological coding.
Remember Munger's reasoning for recommending this text in the first place. Seeing the world through the gene's eye view opens a door in your mind that you simply cannot close. Whether you are navigating advertising, corporate politics, parenting, or your own anxieties, it strips away the comfortable illusions and forces you to be a vastly sharper, more objective thinker.
It is a framework that ultimately asks you to be more deeply aware of your own existence, to constantly ask yourself, why do I feel what I'm feeling right now? Why am I doing what I'm doing?
Am I just reacting automatically to ancient software triggered by a modern environment, or am I consciously choosing my path?
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
I want you to look back down at your hands one more time. The hands that we established are the manipulators of a brilliantly engineered biological machine. But consider this paradox. If your genes built your highly advanced brain solely to ensure their blind, thoughtless survival,
but your brain is now using its massive intelligence to successfully rebel against those very genes.
inventing contraception to stop their replication, adopting strangers to break their math, and redefining the rules of the entire game.
Who is actually winning the evolutionary race? The creator or the creation?
So, friends, that was the complete breakdown. Make sure to take a screenshot of this growth gift, this infographic, so this lesson stay with you. If you want to learn from legends every single day, join our community. I am Amin. Always remember, read more, think deeper. Let me know in the comments who we should cover next. See you in next episode.